All right, KMR, welcome back to the BRAP channel. We're going to answer some questions about the hybrid Renesis GSLSE multi exhaust port motor. Basically, the idea of taking a Mazda Renesis motor, which is side exhaust, and adding the classic RX7 housings, which have peripheral exhaust. And you can see if you have a normal Renesis housing, that is not available. There is kind of an indentation cast in, but you can't just bore a hole. It doesn't make sense. The machining process would be way too much, and you don't have the proper exhaust sleeving or water flow casting that the GSLSE housing had and is readily available at a affordable price through Mazda, through KMR, through Mazda Tricks. So I always get a lot of people asking, why don't you just modify the RX8 housing? Well, really, it just doesn't make sense. As easy as it seems that it would be to just bore a hole through the aluminum, that's not what a factory housing is. A factory housing has a cast area around the exhaust passage and then a stainless or Inconel sleeve, depending on who you ask, in regards to heat control and exhaust flow management. So I don't recommend not having an exhaust sleeve in your traditional RX7 housings. And for cost reasons and reliability reasons, I don't recommend trying to bore a hole and fill it or weld it or sleeve it or any of those options. And just for reference, when peripheral intake porting is done to a housing, that expense is generally more than just buying a GSLSE rotor housing. So a lot of people have asked. That's why I recommend, if you're building a Renesis multi-port configuration motor, that you would just buy the GSLSE rotor housings new, or try to find a good used set versus trying to buy new and machine, or find used RX8 housings and machine them. Financially, it doesn't make sense, and from a reliability standpoint, it doesn't make sense. Just get what the factory made. They're on the shelf. Happy to get them for you if you can't find them elsewhere. So that was just kind of going over one of the big questions that I get asked all the time. I often also get asked intake questions. I believe a lot of people are intending to put this configuration into a Mazda RX-8, which, I love the RX-8 chassis, although Mazda Tricks always intended this to be more of a race configuration motor or a hot rod style motor for aftermarket application, because there is a blend of different parts. I think it also would make a wonderful Renesis or RX-8 motor, provided the application is right or performance reasons are right. And so with the intake manifold, using the stock lower half, and then either going with an aftermarket upper intake, or just completely removing your Mazda RX-8 intake entirely and going to an aftermarket setup like a cast lower half to an ITB setup, downdraft style, or creating a tubular wraparound that can go to some fuel-injected, ECU-controlled ITBs. You could do quad throttle bodies on this setup, or plenum everything together. And that would probably yield the highest horsepower numbers with plenumed style intake to either multiple throttle bodies or a large singular throttle body. But obviously, one of the things to always consider is with Mazda intakes, they are a tuned intake that's designed to take the intake reversion pulse and use that pulse to help accelerate intake air on the other rotor. So you've actually got a pulse manipulation based on the reversion of the ports opening and closing that Mazda uses to help build velocity in the intake and help create good low-end response and mid-range horsepower. So in racing and aftermarket applications where we often replace the intake, we did on the Mazda Trix car, we went with the aftermarket upper. I think in my build, I'd love to test OEM and then obviously test aftermarket if I'm given the opportunity. And I think that I would be happier with the aftermarket because I like higher peak horsepower numbers out of rotaries, provided I'm able to shift into a good power band via whatever gearbox we are running against that motor, which are all considerations to have. So I hope a little of this discussion gives a little bit of insight into what we thought about for intakes, meaning if you're going stock RX8, then by all means, keep all of that stock stuff going. It'll probably give you the best mid and bottom end. But if your goal is more race application or performance application, aftermarket intakes are probably the way to go. And if you're boosted, you're probably going to be locking out most of what Mazda intended for NA application, which are those rotator valves and the plastic intake. If you're going to run any decent boost, I would probably remove that and go to some type of aftermarket or custom-made upper intake manifold. And truthfully, I think one of the limitations of the OEM setup is going to be the OEM throttle body size when it comes to making horsepower. Early on in Japan, there were bored out OEM throttle bodies available for RX8s as a mild power adder application. But the shops that made those have long since stopped importing, and I no longer know if they're available, but I did hear that there were some successes regarding throttle body modification, or in some cases just using aftermarket style throttle bodies to get a little bit more airflow in. And with naturally aspirated cars, ram air, fresh air, cold air is always going to help as well. Getting away from hot air, just like a turbo car, really can protect the engine and give what would seem to be better horsepower or better usage of the horsepower, because the engine can simply make better horsepower with cooler and denser air. All right, so just talking a little bit, I hope everybody enjoys the videos. We're trying to put more knowledge on the channel, or at least more information from my experience as an engine builder at Mazda Trix and an engine builder and racer for my own race team, Kyle Mohan Racing. So please ask the questions. Let's talk rotary, and let's keep all these projects going. If I talk about it, I'm more likely to work on it. So that's a wrap. Hybrid multi-port talk. Thanks for watching.